Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your host, Des Kennedy.
And welcome to Momentum for another week. It's Des here, and this week on the show we've got something a little different for you. This is the show that's all about helping men succeed in life. So normally we're talking to blokes, but this week our special guest is Janet. Last week we spoke to Wayne about his life's journey, and this week we're getting a different perspective from Wayne's wife Janet. I started out by asking Janet about her formative years and what they were like.
Grew up in Melbourne. I was there till I was 10.
Right.
At that point, yes, my father was working, he was Department of Defence or something like that. I think he was working, and my mum was a teacher.
Yes.
And there were 5 kids, so I was one of 5.
Wow.
Dad and Mum, they felt the calling to go and plant a church in Canberra. So when you're 10, doesn't really, you don't even really know where Canberra is.
Yes,
however, they decided to move the whole family to Canberra.
Wow, with 5 kids.
To plant a church.
Yes.
5 kids. And from 10 on, I lived in Canberra, and for the next 18 years I lived in Canberra.
Wow.
Growing up as a pastor's child, look, it's got pros and cons to it.
Yes.
My dad was a very passionate, jolly preacher and was fired up all the time and very much an encourager. Dad was incredible. And Mum, I think still did relief teaching, but was also pastoring. So she would preach as well. So I sort of grew up knowing, both sexes preaching. I was comfortable with that. We were all musicians, so we'd play in the band and do welcome and do everything as the family.
You did a small church.
And so that's what I grew up in. My teens, I didn't really like that, being in the spotlight.
Yeah.
I was considered, quote unquote, the black sheep. So I think my identity, I struggled with who I was and what that meant for me.
Yes.
Did a lot of clubbing, did a lot of, a bit of rebelling, and my poor mother praying all night for me. But so look, I met a guy in the clubs at Canberra and married him. I think I was 21 or I was engaged then. Just sort of eventually my family, one sister moved back to Melbourne, started a family down there. My parents, I think when I was engaged, they were going back to Melbourne to be part of pastoring in a church down there. Yeah. And I was obviously engaged to a Canberran, so I was kind of, I'm staying here. And so 2 of my sisters and I stayed in Canberra.
Right.
And then, I was in Canberra for quite a while. I married my best friend, and he was an incredible man. Loved him to bits. We were really close. We had a lot in common. Yes. And he'd become a Christian, so we had a great
faith in common as well.
Yeah, we had a great life, really. Both of us worked. At that point, we didn't really want children, so. And then really everything changed around 2002 where my father, whom I was extremely close to, and then my dad was diagnosed with a lung condition. And look, from that point on, I had suddenly been hit with the I want children aspect. So my husband at that time and I were fine with that. We were thinking, okay, we'll just try and start a family. But the stress of my dad and we then wanted to move back down to Melbourne. Within, I think, diagnosis, within 12 months, he did pass away. Right. And that really hit all of us. Yeah. My mum was incredibly strong. I had to face a lot of stuff in my late 20s. And yes, it impacted my first husband. We just, without doubt, believed in healing, that Dad would be healed.
Yes.
No doubt whatsoever. And my father was inspirational. He was suffocated basically in the end, could hardly breathe, but he was inspirational in that hospital bed. He was just a hero of mine, of the faith. And my dad, it was horrible to watch, but I learnt a lot about faith journey then. And my first husband decided, that God really wasn't for him, and saw that Dad wasn't healed. And so we moved back to Melbourne at that point and to be with my dad, and he died within the 5 weeks of me being there. So I was with him every day, which was very special. And my first husband, within about 4 or 5 months, I noticed was drifting away from me emotionally. And I did suspect something going on with a work colleague of his. And, I found things that I shouldn't have, and he proclaimed that he was in love with someone else. Within about 5 months, I sort of lost my dad and lost my best friend and my husband.
So there you were, having gone through those two traumas of, your husband declaring his relationship with somebody else, and your father passed away. So what happened in your world at that point?
Well, I was left alone. I was left with a lot of grief. So sort of a double whammy, really, grieving the marriage. That went on for, my first husband literally left the building. So it was like, see you later. Lived in a separate place in Melbourne. I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and believed for that marriage for 2.5 years. And I eventually, missing my dad excruciatingly, but I was just still pressed into God. I was nursing at the time, and I think the trauma, I couldn't nurse anymore. And then I noticed within about 18 months, 2 years, I then kept getting physically unwell. And my body, now in hindsight, I can say my body shut down. So I lost 20 kilos in a month, and everyone didn't know what was going on, and I was very, very ill. And then I ended up moving back with my mother. And so when I was, 30, early 30s, and that would have been very, Mum was amazing for me. I was in bed for, I think it was about 11 months of 2006. Yeah, she nursed me. She would pray with me. I was in so much pain. I was basically ended up diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia.
Yes.
And in that bed, I called out to him, and he would speak to me, and I listened a lot to Joyce Meyer, listened a lot to Michael W. Smith music, anything I could do to get my faith strong and expecting great things for the future. And that's when he pretty much put on my heart to help people with chronic illness. So I did stop nursing and got back to being a trainer, a fitness instructor, and helping people with chronic disease. And then, so that's sort of what happened to me in that period. Unfortunately, I got very sick, but that was the time in my life where I really established such a rock solid relationship with God.
So what happened then in terms of you arrived at the Gold Coast at some point?
Yes. So then when I eventually did get some strength and I'd studied from my bed. Trying to do personal training, and studied hard to finish that. Even though I couldn't even do one squat myself, I knew that was my calling. And he just basically said, and my healthcare team around me, you need to go somewhere that's warmer for your health's sake. So, within about 3 years after that, I felt I'd had a friend up on the Gold Coast, a couple of friends, and I'd holidayed here, and I thought, I really felt at peace moving here. Even though it was away from all my family, I felt my calling was to here, and I did. I moved up here, and then, the rest is...
Well, tell me about the rest, because it's the rest that we're really...
Yes. So, yes,
You joined a church, I guess? Or...
look, friends of mine were going to a particular church, and I was sort of like, happy to sit at the back, God was everything to me. He was my husband. He was my father. He was my best friend.
Yeah.
Within about 4 months, I think, of moving here, I did meet Wayne. In hindsight, again, I'd seen Wayne at the church.
Yes.
How do I say this? Didn't really interest me in pursuing anything because at that point, I just wanted to start afresh and see what God was going to do.
Yes.
So I wasn't interested in
Yeah.
that. And then, one night we were at this mutual friend's house and over for dinner, and I met Wayne and got chatting with him and was really drawn into his, again, very jolly, very bubbly, very much like my dad was, and great sense of humour. We just hit it off straight away, and his beautiful girls, I remember them. I think after that, 8 months or something later, we were married, 10 months later.
Wow.
And look, I assumed at that point that I was marrying, a real God-loving, God-fearing, good man, a really good man.
Yes.
Hi, it's Des here, and this week we're not talking to a bloke, we're talking to Janet instead, who is, of course, Wayne's wife, who we spoke to last week on the show. If you missed that chat with Wayne, you can listen to his story at our website or on Momentum Podcasts, available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up after the break, we'll continue hearing Janet's story.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
This is Momentum with Tim and Des. And this week on the show, we're doing something a little different and speaking to Janet. Now, Janet is Wayne's wife. We spoke to Wayne last week, and as we continue with Janet's story, we pick up where she started getting a little fearful of Wayne as he reacted in anger to some of the stress points in his life.
I think just gradually it was a beginning to be a bit scared of him and his anger.
Yes.
And just...
We hadn't seen that.
I hadn't seen that.
Yeah.
And it was like triggers.
Yes.
He'd be fine and then bang. It was a bit Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It was, I didn't know when it was going to hit.
So you didn't know what the triggers were?
I didn't know until, yes, we did kind of decipher what the 3 triggers were.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just really shocked and surprised that I'd thought I'd started afresh and it was all good, but no, there was a lot of anger and a lot of... In a sense, Wayne was sort of pushing me away from him trying to talk. I'm a talker and I like to dig deep into stuff and let's sort this out. I'm a peacemaker. I like peace in the home. I believe anything can be sorted out. I don't care if it takes 3 hours of conversation, you can still sort something out.
Yes.
And Wayne just didn't want to do that.
Yes.
So the more I pressed, it just didn't work. And it got to the point that, yes, after a few years, I was petrified of Wayne.
Wow.
And his responses.
Yeah, you didn't know how he was going to react or...
Correct.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So how did that make you feel as a person? Because there's probably a lot of guys listening to the show and they're saying, I can't talk to my wife because, I'd be embarrassed or, I don't want to face that reality.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's really good for them to understand how that felt when you're on the receiving end.
I always consider marriage as a one. You're one. So when one kind of pulls away, an individual in that oneness pulls away, it's very hard on the other person to try and keep the communication going and try and keep the household going and try and keep anything going.
Yeah.
So I felt alone. I felt squashed. I felt very belittled because unfortunately Wayne's girls were very exposed to what was going on and half the time he'd run off with them and take them because they were his children.
Right.
They would experience the abuse as well, unfortunately. And for me, yes, very alone, I couldn't really talk to anyone. I felt, like the size of an ant.
Wow.
I didn't feel like I meant anything to Wayne or to the girls at that point.
Wow.
Not that it was their fault at all, but it was just the way that it worked out was I would be left at home alone crying. My family, I'd ring them. They were aware of what was going on. I felt vulnerable. I felt exposed. I felt, because some people in the church did know, but just didn't know how to handle hard basket. I did go to DV help.
Yeah.
And, was told 1% of men change, and look, he's never going to change.
Wow.
But I just sensed again, when I was stripped of everything I had, I took it back to, I have you, God. What are you saying? What are you trying to teach me here?
Yeah.
And I had to press into him. I had nothing else, and I had no hope. Being petrified of your spouse is a very lonely, very dark place to be. Yeah. So to tell other people if they're not sure what it's doing to the spouse, yes, it's completely stripping them of any kind of confidence, any kind of confidence in the marriage, any kind of, your love and your respect and your honour, the self-worth, your self-esteem gets completely squashed.
So how did you, he didn't want to talk about his world or his issues. How did you break that down to the point where you could talk openly about, what was happening in your world and what you were unhappy with and what you were happy with?
Well, once we were communicating well again, and there were rules put in place by a very good counsellor, that once if there was a line crossed, then no, conversation finished, because I had to gain respect for Wayne again, trust. I had zero trust in this relationship or Wayne, but I also then had to allow him to come back in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
And communicate. We both had to learn how to communicate well, because we didn't know how to do that. Obviously, as a man, you do sense whether you're being heard or not, and being understood or not.
Yes.
I think the key for Wayne was, or for both of us really, it was to say to the other person, so that's where you learn to paraphrase. So you would check in with the person and say, so is this what I think you're saying this? This is what I think you're saying. This is what I hear you saying.
Yes.
And it's their job to say, nah, you've kind of missed the mark there. You're not really understanding me. You're not listening or whatever. So you try again. And this is what we learn in counselling, that if you've missed the mark, keep trying. And so if you're a man saying, my wife just doesn't get me, I've given up, it's all hopeless. Well, no, I believe any relationship can come back to that raw fact of love and respect, that you can communicate well if you allow time and some grace.
Yes.
And your job to then is to say, no, you've missed the mark. Can we try it again? Not just walk away and say, well, I'm not understood.
Yeah.
We still to this day, Wayne and I, make sure we've heard each other.
So finally, tell me what your relationship is like now.
As I said, Wayne is the most incredible person on the planet. Look, are we perfect? Far from it. But we have an amazing marriage. We've got a ministry now where both of us really feel we want to help people that are struggling in marriage, and really marriages that are dead. We have an incredible relationship, praise God, with our daughters, and between us, yes, we're best friends, and we try and find the best in each other and try and encourage each other to communicate well. We understand that guys seeing blue, women seeing pink.
Yes.
And you've got to kind of blend.
Yes, that's right.
Blend that. And that's okay. And appreciate each other's differences. If I can say this, I think we've learnt to put each other first.
It's Momentum with Tim and Des. And isn't that just the most amazing story of redemption and forgiveness? This week we've been speaking with Janet about her relationship and marriage with Wayne. And next week on the show we'll speak to them both together for an in-depth discussion about life, relationships and healing. Don't forget you can listen to today's chat with Janet on our website or subscribe to Momentum Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org.